Well, hello there my YouTube gang, what's up? It's Joniversity again, and today I'm finally going to do a video about this whole Egypt thing. And I'm sorry I waited this long, I just had to wait until after the Friday prayers because I didn't want to make any video before I had a better perspective on what is happening there. But before I start, I have to express my deep and painful disappointment from two of my favorite YouTubers. And I'm talking about Snowwalker1 and Vogter2100. Now, for some unholy reason, both Vogter and Snowwalker decided to mirror one of the most stupid, irresponsible, juvenile, propagandistic videos I've ever seen here on YouTube by anyone. And it's titled "The Revolution Has Arrived," and you can see it running up there in the side. And of course there's also a link in the description box. But the thing is, the worst thing about this video is not only the message itself, which as I said is dumb, juvenile, irresponsible and filled with propaganda and lies. The other problem is the guy who made the video, which is now featured by both Vogter and Snowwalker. And this guy is called Ken O'Keefe. And I'm not going, just to go over his entire misdeeds and bloody history. I'm just going to give you a little portion of his views. Let's go.
To buy into the notion that Osama bin Laden and 19 hijackers are responsible for this event is the height of lunacy. It is the most ridiculous conspiracy of all.
Well, who is responsible?
Absolutely inside job. The U.S. government and intelligence agencies, including Mossad, including the Mossad agents who were in Liberty Park, who were told to go and capture the event on cameras and admitted to it in Tel Aviv on Israeli television. They obviously had foreknowledge of the event.
The Israelis are the ones who...
The Israelis and the Americans, they could not have done it without the government and the inside job that was required.
Now, really, Snowwalker and Vogter, are you actually supporting this guy? Or maybe you're supporting his irresponsible cry for a revolution, no matter what this revolution might actually end up with? Or maybe you're just giving into his propaganda and lies, and actually willing to spread them around with the reputation that you have built for yourselves. Now, if any of these questions speak to you, then you can consider this a semi-official request to remove this horrible video from your channel. Thank you in advance. Okay. But now, to our actual subject. The reason I say that the video I just mentioned is both dumb and dangerous is because revolutions in the Middle East don't have that great of an historical reputation to them. Actually, thinking about it, revolutions worldwide don't usually end up with peace, love and harmony, no matter how justified they are. And in Egypt's case, they are justified. Mubarak is a dictator running an oppressive regime which tramples human rights and disregards the will and the benefit of his people. But the question we, freedom-loving people who wish only the best for Egyptians should ask ourselves is, will this revolution end up in a society and country which is better than today's Mubarak's Egypt? Or maybe are we just on the way to yet another Middle Eastern disastrous regime which might actually prove to be worse than Mubarak's dictatorship? Now, what I'm going to do next is present you with some facts and numbers, like I like to do most of the time, which I hope will make your thoughts and conclusions on the matter, well, a little bit more calculated and a little bit less emotional. And by the end of this video, you might even understand why Ken O'Keefe and his gang are, in a way, just as dangerous as Mubarak himself. Okay, So of course the last notable revolution in the Middle East was in 1979 when the Islamic Republic of Iran was established after overthrowing the despicable Shah, who, like Mubarak, was actually heavily supported by the West, and just like Mubarak, was thrown down all the stairs by a weak, apologetic Democratic president known as Jimmy Carter. Ugh. But you know, this is just a side note. Actually, to add to this side note, I wonder why Obama suddenly came to be all concerned about the will of the people after his deafening silence during the 2009 Iran elections riots. Actually, I don't even remember Ken O'Keefe doing any video on that matter. Interesting. Anyway, what we see in Egypt now, and we actually saw in Iran too, is that fractions from all over the political spectrum, everyone from Islamists to Marxists to Democrats, they all went hand in hand and overthrew the Shah. But very soon after, everyone except for the Muslims were either deported, jailed, or killed, or a mix of the three. And today, of course, Iran is one of the most oppressive regimes the modern world has ever seen, and has people in power which might actually be crazy enough to try to hasten the coming of the 12th Imam, the Mahdi, their version of a Messiah. And the way they need to do that is, of course, by starting an apocalyptic world war, which is a pre-requirement for his return. Now, mind you, I'm not saying that Iran and Egypt are anywhere close. They are not. They are two very distinctive different cultures and people. So I'm not even saying that the outcome will be the same. All I'm doing is outlining the dangers of a revolution when people don't think what will happen the day after. And this is exactly what is happening in Egypt today. And sadly enough, except for the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, there is not any other really organized and agreed upon leadership or political party that is leading this otherwise very justifiable revolution. And just by the way, if you think that Baradei represents anyone but himself, you might be interested to know that not a lot of people in Egypt actually know his name, let alone know who and what he stands for. So what will happen the day after Mubarak in case this regime change will not be gradual, cautious, and well thought of? Okay, so by now you probably all heard of the Muslim Brotherhood, who, despite what apologists might say, are a group of theocratic wackos who wish to establish an Islamic country in Egypt, who wish to re-establish the Islamic Caliphate, who openly call for the murder of Jews and destruction of Israel, who openly support the war against the West and Western ideals, who openly support terror organizations like Hamas, and who throughout history, except for a very short time, have engaged in and supported terrorism, violence, and jihad as a way to bring about an Islamic country in hopes to lay the foundations for an Islamic caliphate and eventually, well, take over the world, which is, like it or not, the ultimate goal of Islam. Now, not all Muslims and maybe even not all Muslim Brotherhood supporters actually ascribe to this insane and horrific idea, but the fact remains that this is their stated goal and political agenda. And make no mistake, if they come into power, even in a democratic way, in the best case, you will get what is known as an illiberal democracy, which gives you the basic idea of a free and fair election, but in which, if to quote Fareed Zakaria, the elected majority restricts individual rights and freedoms and uses the country as its instrument of power. Now, what I've heard many people say in response is that the Muslim Brotherhood isn't as powerful as people in the West might be afraid that they are. And the evidence they provide for that is the outcomes of the previous elections in which the Muslim Brotherhood didn't pass, I think, 20%. These are the same people that accuse Mubarak of having unfair and rigged elections that distort the outcomes of the will of the people. Now, I don't know, this sounds somewhere between completely stupid and dangerously dishonest. So, what I decided to do is to give you the numbers, the cold, hard facts, and let you decide what you think will happen. So, some background info to begin with. Egypt is predominantly Muslim. Muslims amount to about 80 to 90% of the population, which amounts to about 80 million people. Of those Muslims, the overwhelming majority are Sunni, with a minority of Sufis and some other fractions and schools of thought. Other than Muslims, you of course have the heavily persecuted Christian Coptics. You have 200 Jews, and other than Christians and Jews, you of course have Baha'is, which are actually outlawed in Egypt, together with other two minority religions. And actually Baha'is are basically outlawed and persecuted around the Middle East. This is why they have established their center at Israel. Okay, now back to the point. What I'm going to do next is give you the numbers, all of them taken from Pew Research and the different surveys they did in the area. First, a nice number. 59% of Egyptians think that democracy is preferable to any other kind of government. Although I don't really think they know what democracy is, since, well, they never had one, and I don't think they teach that in their schools. And what I fear is that Egyptians, just like many people in the West, are dumb enough to think that democracy simply means the rule of majority. Well, it doesn't. Democracy stands to much more than simply, having elections and letting people decide who will run the regimes. And all those other things that democracy stands for, I'm not sure if Egyptians could accommodate them with their other views. And the reason I say that is because 85% of Egyptians favorably see Islam's role in politics. Or put in other words, they want an Islamic-based democracy. Now, if you think that democracy and Islam can go hand in hand, I encourage you to see another video I posted a while back, and there's a link, of course, in the description box. This number might also actually explain why 22% of Egyptians said that in some circumstances, a non-democratic state might be preferable. On the bright side, when asked whether there is a struggle in their nation between those who want to modernize their country and Islamic fundamentalists, 61% said they did not see such struggle. That said, almost a third did see such a struggle, and the majority of that third that saw the struggle sided with, well, the fundamentalists. And my only guess is that 61% didn't see the struggle with modernizers because, well, nobody's trying to modernize Egypt, which is why they have so many Sharia-based laws in their law book. That said, about 60% of Egyptians said they were somewhat or very concerned about Islamic extremists. Although it seems that Egyptians don't see cutting hands and feet, flogging, and stoning as extreme, which leads me to my next set of numbers. 54% of Egyptians support making gender segregation a law in Egypt. But that number is actually low because listen to the following. 82% of Egyptians support the stoning of people who commit adultery. 77% support whipping and cutting of hands for crimes like theft and robbery. I wonder what they think should happen to gay people. Oh, but the number I liked best? 84% of Egyptians believe that there should be a death penalty for people who leave Islam. 84%. Well, That's Middle Eastern democracy for you guys. Okay, so this is more or less where I leave you off. And I would love to hear what you think is happening and will happen in Egypt in the short and long term. So, my beloved YouTube gang, peace, love, harmony. Have a good one. People of Egypt, we are with you, but, you know, make sure you do the right things if you want an actual democracy. And that's it. Bye-bye!